All right, well, welcome everyone to the December 8th SIG Node meeting. Have two primary items on today's agenda, as well as just our typical update on our PR health. And so for that first one, I don't know, Sergey, do you want to talk through on if you were able to collect any data?
I just wanted to talk about PRs that been closed and merged. So out of closed PRs, there is one that you Derek closed about ephemeral containers transition state. And you suggested that we track it as part of ephemeral container GA. So if you want to GA it soon, I don't know who want to, if somebody plans to work on this GA, please pay attention and take a look at this PR.
Yeah.
Other than that, there is no surprises. Everything slow creation of PRs, but we're also in code free, so only merged PRs are cherry picks.
Yep. Okay. So thanks for that update. And I think the discussion around ephemeral containers, or anytime we discuss new container types, is a nice lead into Rodrigo, the topic you put on, which I admittedly had not seen Tim Hawkins' proposal. So do you want to kind of summarize that for folks and maybe talk through what you see moving ahead?
Yes, I can sum it up. But maybe first it's better. I wanted to ask if others wanted to create other pre-proposals, or if I think maybe you, Derek, or Seth wanted to explore some other approach with a DAG directly. But I'm not sure. Yeah, I want to know if someone can review Tim's proposal. I, of course, have a look at it and yeah, just know what are the next steps, because I thought different people wanted to create different proposals, and we wanted to see the pros and cons of different proposals and see which path we want to continue. But yeah, I'm not sure what the next steps of if I misunderstood something.
So we had a meeting before with a lot of people. So it was like a lot of man hours spent on this meeting discussing various options, how to get from initial proposal that we wanted to merge in 120 to where we want to get in the end. And we threw in few ideas, and ideas were gradual from a little bit of improvement over what we had with Rodrigo, and then all the way to graph defined in a pod specification. So Tim's Hawkins proposal is somewhere in the middle. So it's just we split initialization into named stages, and these names are predefined in this proposal. There is it alludes to the possibility in future to extend it with the user-defined stages, but for now it's predefined stages that have a defined order, and stages are like before network created, after network created, and initialization of user code, something like that. And then inside every stage, there is a possibility to either run container to completion or run container continuously. So so imagine init containers that can stay alive after they started. So yeah, so there's a kind of meat of the proposal, and the reason for this proposal is because as opposed to graph is we believe it will be a little bit more user friendly, so it's easier to operate with it. So you don't need to users would make less mistakes defining it and defining the graph and all the dependencies, and it will be easier for injectors to inject containers into specific places. So you know that you need to execute before network, then you inject into before network stage. What this proposal doesn't solve is relationships inside the stage. So if you have multiple containers, setting up a network, like one doing some certificates, another doing some IP tables, then you cannot define ordering of these containers. So this is not solved in this proposal, and it's intentionally so because like it complicates the design and but may not have practical use. So now we're in stage of collecting like alternative proposals or like criticism for this proposal.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know, Seth, if you want to give an update on where you were on your thoughts, but I think it's important that we all realize that we are still chasing down bugs with just the init container and primary container separation today. So even in my first review of Tim's PR, like, I think we need to appreciate as a community, like we still have bugs on just these two types. And so I know Seth himself, rather than writing a proposal, was probably chasing down bugs on why are init containers being rerun when not expected. So like maybe to that point, Seth, do you want to talk through like the types of things we see that in the code today might make it hard, or how we could expand the phases to actually be working in the code today? I think you're here, Seth. I don't know if you.
It looks like he.
All right, the mic's warming up. All right. Right. So, I mean, we still have bugs, and a lot of them center around the fact that, I mean, so the kubelet is getting state about the containers from the container runtime, right? And it's doing that in a loop asynchronously. It's reporting status to the API server asynchronously from that. And then it's making decisions about what state the pod is in asynchronously from that. So, you know, we have these situations where, like I've got a PR open right now where I, in an attempt to reclaim space on my nodes, I deleted all of the completed containers. Well, when I do that, it deletes completed init containers, and turns out the kubelet reruns all the init containers. Now, even though the main containers are running, which basically if once the containers are removed from the runtime, it updates the container status and it goes, oh, it doesn't exist in the runtime anymore. So it erases the container status. And then all the code that determines what state we're in says, oh, none of the init containers have been run, but it doesn't consider the fact that it could just be that we have no record of them running, but the main containers running is evidence that the init containers ran at some point in the past.
Just to add to that, Seth, though, it's not like you randomly decided to just delete your containers. It's that garbage collection loops in the kubelet can do this stuff all the time.
Yes. So that's the way I can trigger it manually, but this can happen at any point in time. Now we're somewhat covered in the docs, and that init containers are supposed to be idempotent, and you should be able to rerun them without side effects. But do people really do that? Probably not. We had a situation in our product where that wasn't the case, and it caused problems. So, so the code that determines what state the pod is in and where we are in the pod lifecycle, right? It's like, so we've run init container 1 and 2. We haven't run init container 3. None of the main containers are running, so we need to run init container 3. That's all very complicated, and it's spread out. It's not real centralized. So, I mean, those are things that we haven't even gotten our current state machine working out. And so I'm really hesitant to expand it when no one really rocks what it currently does. And I'm not sure what the path forward for that is. I mean, I'm not sure if we need to clean up the code so that our current state machine is understandable and documented first before we look at expanding it, or whether we need to I guess I'm hesitant to do a redesign and a rewrite all at once.
So on that point though, Seth, I think we never really got checkpointing in the kubelet. So the fact that we try to reconstruct state of the pod lifecycle machine by asking the container runtime, what its understanding of state was, which in some cases could have been historical, and then we had other subsystems going to lead it, as you talked through. I'm wondering, to make it more advanced, do we need checkpointing where the kubelet can write a log that's not dependent on the container runtime kind of detective analysis, for lack of a term, that we seem to do right now. But that feels like in Tim's proposal or in any of these proposals is the type of thing that we might be missing to make this thing really work. Do you feel differently?
Yeah, I agree. And in this particular case, we have to, like, the kubelet historically has seen the container runtime as the authoritative source for container status, right? So, I mean, every time the pod reports status, it rebuilds the container status from what the state of the runtime is. But that's not a real good thing to do, because the kubelet has lifecycle knowledge that the runtime does not. And so there are conditions in which, like, after a certain point, the kubelet says, okay, you're not the authoritative source anymore, because this is a terminal state for the container, right? So I'm gonna cache this state, the state of this container, and regardless of what happens to the container runtime, whether, if it gets garbage collected or whatever else, I'm not going to mirror that up to the API server, because in my design, this is a terminal state, and the condition should never change after this.
So Seth, I want to add one thing. So initially, why we don't want to do the Kubernetes checkpoint, that's exactly this proposal. Because back then, there are already many people described, they want to have the container dependency. They want to have the pod dependency, but then nobody have the concrete example. And also in the community, there are many people want simplification, because they worry about the adoption, right? So because back then there's the many of the Docker use cases, and also many people using systemd within of the pod, or like they using systemd in capture into the container and describe the container dependency. Even like today, I believe OpenShift have that some of the similar use cases. So nobody really understand what it is the dependency between pod and within pod. So if we have like the checkpoint, and then basically it is so hard for us to move the next stage. No matter it is any change into the pod spec will be much harder, or anything in the node spec, especially like the also resource requirement, like the quality of the services always moving target for us. So that's why we made the decision not to check a point to each component, which is in the node. They maintain their template of the checkpoint. So we do see that CNI and many Kubernetes, many their checkpoint cause some trouble chain for our release, but then they quite quickly take action and move forward. So that's why we want to understand, but we never want to check a point. I just want to share here. So this is exactly like, for example, Tim's proposal. If we check a point, Team proposal basically is almost impossible. We could move to next stage, but right now, actually, we don't have the checkpoint. So then we start thinking about the more serious of the dependency, or introduce some fees within of the pod, and we can talk about maybe we should be checkpoint, but once we have the checkpoint, like for example, some people still think about let's not capture all the use cases, then we need to think harder. So is that really our version, like the first version, we seriously want a checkpoint, because the duplicate will be much harder.
So I don't think, Don, I'm trying to say that we want a checkpoint. I'm saying I just want to make sure that people appreciate that, like, there are people spending time and energy trying to get the existing system working, which when we can point the bugs that have existed in the containers that are just related to the fact that we garbage collect these things, right? And people run these machines and they see things rerunning, and it's surprising. And we have a two-phase system. To go to an n-phase system that Tim's proposing, like the key thing that's missing is, well, how do we capture phase completion? And, SPR, I mean, I don't want to say it's a bit of a hack, but it's like we we kind of look at one part of the pod status to know if another part completed. I don't know if that's the model we want to settle on, but like absent of all these proposals, we have to figure out does the kubelet try to reconstruct state by polling the runtime as it does now, or does it capture what it did? And that feels like a requisite need for any of the solutions.
But Derek, I haven't looked at that the bug in detail, but I just want to say that also our garbage collection used to be just live with existing of the Docker behavior. So it is not well defined, because we do know when we work on the container runtime interface, we did talk to the containerd community. We want to define that API after finish the runtime stage, and we want to do more image stage. And also containerd start to have like the checkpoint. Containerd also start to have the checkpoint, and we didn't really change that code.
No.
So,
what I'm saying is that the garbage collection behavior that is in the kubelet today, not in what a container runtime may be doing, but the fact that the kubelet today goes and prunes dead containers or prunes unused images.
Yes.
Those
I
containers
understand
that we prune are actually in some cases associated with pods who are still active in their life. And so
I understand what you say.
Yeah.
I just want to say that content garbage collection actually in the past, Nantal and David and I discussed, we have to redesign that garbage collection. I just want to say, even later we have the container runtime interface, and we didn't evolve. Of course, the things change, people move on, but from day one, we talk about, and we even communicate with the containerd community, try to working on new garbage collection. I'm not talking about is the Kubernetes not doing garbage collection, still Kubernetes, but we have want to the container runtime interface, define that interface, and also have like the utilize the containerd checkpoint, because they did a checkpoint. We shouldn't remove those kind of things. Basically, the way you run. So there's something we've been talking about, but the people's move on. So a lot of things move on. And so that's why we haven't done those things. My point is just not like the Kubernetes have to do the checkpoint to solve that problem or whatever things. There are other things already being discussed and maybe even half cooked, but we haven't finished the last couple managed here.
Okay. So I guess, Rodrigo, for like your question on like alternate proposals or things to do next, I guess what's missing in Tim's proposal is, in my view, like or any proposal, a confident implementation plan, given the issues we do know we see. So I don't know. I'm curious if the types of things that we're raising now, Rodrigo, that we hear in new instances of, even with the two styles of containers we have today, are these things that you had seen as well, or are we over? Do you feel like I might be overcomplicating this, or what
I didn't hear correctly the last part. Can you repeat?
I'm curious, like, it's possible I might be overthinking this, but the fact that I still see us struggle with init and primary containers, and we have problems with that alone. Like, is this something that you had maybe thought through on, like how we could maybe better capture phases between? I don't know, what thing have you done relative to Tim's proposal, or maybe Tim himself, who may or may not be here, to think about like how we capture depth across these phases?
Well, I haven't thought in advance how we capture the phases. I wanted to know if the overall direction looks fine before putting more thought into this, like into this road, like, because maybe we don't want phases, we just want explicit dependencies between containers, and then like I wanted to know where the what direction do we want to take before making a design. But I think what I'm not following is if we use the pod status to know when a container was run or not, we're still missing information there.
Sorry, I didn't
because,
understand the question here.
For the sidecar containers implementation that I did using annotations, I relied on the pod status, and that worked quite well for our use cases. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'm probably missing something.
Yeah. So maybe to proceed on this, I have to finish reading Tim's proposal. I think my comments got through the first half. I'm not sure if everyone else has had a chance to review. So like, it's good that we continue to look at this and maybe give our feedback on there. And I'll just be transparent. Like, I have not had time since our last meeting to put together a more in-depth thought. This is a hard area. So
yeah. And we also can look at it from a perspective that we have enough use cases that we believe that like maybe phases will be a solution, or we can reject it and say DAG will be a solution. But then even this is a solution we can only implement first few steps. We believe that like crucial. So in case of phases proposal, we can implement init containers that stay forever and then split everything to phases with checkpoints. So we can like, I mean, there may be stages in any proposal. So like, but I think what's important to understand where we're going is a North Star. And this is, I believe, Team's document was concentrated on, like, are we confident that this number of end user scenarios will be enough to solve all the problems? That's why he put like logging and network as a first class. Like, I mean, he started with the user scenarios rather than with like implementation specific things. So if we agree on North Star, it may be easier to discuss it further. How can we
agree that is the North Star? I read the proposal, I like it, and but the problem is, like, for example, Rodrigo, I also read many comments, and I found people comment that's not enough. But I also see some other argument say, of course, the argument from team. Also, I personally also believe that argument, because in the past, when every time people talk about me more complicated use cases, I will using similar like the fixed proposal there. So then, who have the more complicated use cases, and can we just think about this proposal is not enough? Try to poke a fixed scenario is not covered. So we really need a more complicated system D, like of the dependency, and describe that one, because we also talk about that in the past. So can we just have the cases, someone, and dig into the cases and say that's not enough, more concrete disk cases, that's not enough. And also we then, on the other hand, how to mitigate is possible, this proposal is possible. Like I like what you say, the SIG, what's the milestone, what's the stage, how we migrate to that stage. We need to think about how to step by step get today's existing of the production environment to that new stage, so that. But the first thing, like the Rodrigo say, this is our North Star. How we are going to figure out this is North Star? Can we come up all those use cases people use to think about the system D like of the proposal, and more detail from the problem statement, and then we can say that is there's the possible we can use in this fixed proposal.
Yeah. I feel like the graph dependency is like the most flexible one, and I worry if we introduce anything which isn't heading towards that end game, then the intermediate specs or whatever we have won't be compatible. Like, okay, we add stages and suddenly we find, oh, if we want to go to a graph as the end game, now the changes that we made on that path aren't really compatible with graph endgame. So
I'm not sure there is a problem, Monroe, because basically if you have stages, when you move to a DAG, you can just replace the stages from all containers in this stage, depend on all containers in the next stage, and you can just just look at it as a graph. So I don't see any big issues. You will have a problem if you want to do it the other way around. If you have explicit dependencies and you want to move to phases, but if you have loosely coupled phases, sure, you can just just represent in the dependencies all containers in phase A depends on all containers in phase B, and you get the same behavior just with dependencies.
So the one thing, and this might be in the proposal, but it wasn't when I got there, was, or at least as far as I had read, was I still feel like in the phase discussion and we say a certain container can keep running, during the life of a pod, any one of these phase sidecar containers can stop, right? And the primary container could still be running. And I wasn't hearing a use case that captured the pod sandbox should be torn down if one of these sidecars ceases to run. If I think about these sidecars providing network egress or other capabilities potentially to these primary containers, some type of shared fate among them seems like something I could see being potentially desirable, but maybe that's in the rest of the doc that I haven't seen. But I feel like our definitions are rather loose on what to do when the container stops, but very strong on the what to do when starting. And I'm just curious if there are scenarios where we want to tear down the entire sandbox and restart it if one of these sidecars had shut down.
Yeah, I think the proposal mentions that like fatal critical containers or that kind of thing are on purpose not solved in this proposal. I think it mentions something like that, not much reasoning. But in any case, I agree, even with critical containers or not, that the failure modes are something that needs more exploration or undetermination phase. Because, yeah, in some cases, if the service mesh that gives you network fails, maybe it's a bigger issue than if a logging container fails and it's restarted and you just queue up a little bit. I'm not sure if you want to destroy the pod sandbox in any case, like if the service mesh fails, you just don't want to restart the service mesh container and that is it. I really don't know.
Okay, well, I think we all have more to read, and hopefully we can sync up with Tim as well in the future if he wants to come discuss it as well.
Next time,
so Derek,
next time, can we? I will invite the team here. If next time, we don't need to rush next week, and I think give us some time and the signal discuss, because I think this topic is complicated topic. It's been discussed many times, even from the beginning of the Kubernetes founded. Right, so we don't need to rush. But when we ready, I think that we invited the team and several other folks here. And then we can more seriously talk about accept this proposal, move forward, or reject the proposal and want to do some other direction. Even we could just say, okay, hold. We just say, oh, we are just like the Derek earlier, both you and the Seth mentioned that even implicit phases, stages. Today we already have implicit, right? So we cannot handle very well, and we don't have confidence to move it. We also can communicate, right? So that's kind of, but needs thinking about the next year, beginning of next year, found some time, and then invite him. Then we can dedicate one meeting with the more detail discussing this one. Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to come back to this topic of Derek, what you brought, that we trying to get what we have working. So I mean, I'm trying to get into this area, and all the information I get so far and what needs improvement, mostly user facing. So I thought that this PR that Seth is working on is just an edge case, and like I was treating it like this, but it feels like to me that after this discussion that we have more issues internally, and Dawn also mentioned that we need to formalize and maybe even redesign garbage collection. So can we surface this issue somehow? Like, can we make it more visible to community as well? I mean, we can.
So Sergey, I think the way I look at this is like, in the same way that everyone who works within a vendor who offers Kubernetes to their users, we all get bugs, right? And sometimes we see these bugs and we don't give them the attention they deserve, and other times we get bugs that take time. We're making a big push at Red Hat to take a look at every bug, right? To try to improve the quality of the product that we put out, as well as the quality in the community upstream. And so the bug that Seth encountered, I think, is at least as old as 1.11 in Kubernetes when it was first reported to us. Now, I don't know if Seth has the history of like when we also discovered it had another unintended bad side effect, but like, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I feel like at Red Hat, we've been trying to keep init containers running since their inception. And it has been a constant source of maintainership pain to just keep going. And it is not like one of those areas that makes everyone feel great. So it's hard to get these things to just like surface up to be visible to the community unless you have like user reports coming in saying, I see this weird thing, and we all spend the time to look at it. So like, I'm curious if we went through the Kube issue repo, would we have seen similar strange reports? But when you start to see enough of them, you're like, oh, this is weird. Why are we seeing init containers rerun? You start to dig in and you find, cobwebs, right? And so like, I'm sure Google and Amazon and everyone else on the call has similar situations. We're just hitting this now because we're trying to make a major push to shore up what we have.
I just want to follow up what Derek said here. So this is why in the past, I prefer SIG Node contributor always have like their vendor work, because they support their vendor. It's not just add a new feature. So then we'll see more complexity into the Kubernetes and also Node. The complexity, it is the big, a lot of new feature added, it cause a lot of the side effects. And to the Node, also production runtime. So this is why not just like the people don't want to share knowledge. It's just we share knowledge, you may ignore. Unless you really do the production support, you have the ownership end to end. You won't share the pain as us. I've been here since day one, even before Kubernetes names formed. And also I used to be in the Borg. So in the working as the lead for the Borg environment, same like the Node today. So many people talk about new feature, and I have to hold bar because that's have the side effect to many users. So it's not, so I just want to share here. So that's why a lot of time we kind of like sometimes maybe a little bit harsh, maybe like the raise the bar too high, because that's affect many workloads and the production. And so this is why we kind of require of the contributor also have the more production experience to support their own production to some extent. So then we understand what we are talking about here.
So the answer is, it will come to me naturally. I got it, but maybe we can,
To share a private conversation I was with Seth, it was like, we could literally stop all feature development in Kubernetes and be busy for the next 4 years, just shoring up the edge cases and odd bugs that can have catastrophic side effects. So like, it's just a matter of, I'm sure everyone has different queues they can go through. And we personally, I think at Red Hat have seen a lot of pain with broad init container and primary container usage with dealing with side effects that we didn't account for in the initial design. And we've just been trying to like poke at them for the last couple of years.
Yeah. And also even lead container, we actually, both Derek and I gave a lot of hard time too. With the first, we basically spot many issues. And we did made some trade-off because there's the many of the use cases we need that in need container. For sure. Even for Borg use cases, I know we definitely need something similar. But the problem it is there's the many incompatible with the initial pod spec. So that's why we push a lot. The buys very high, take a really long time. Still until today, we saw tons of the bugs. And also, like in the comment to the Teams doc, I did mention that the kernel also keep changing because the kernel changing and the more, especially network namespace actually keep changing, evolve. So there are more and more use cases like the sidecar container for the services mesh. That's came along with those network namespace involvement. So Kubernetes have to also evolve to catch the game. And so that's the problem. But on the other hand, there's the production. And so this is why a lot of time we basically have to raise the bar and have to define the category too here.
By the way, I'd like to be positive. Like, we're not trying to be inert forever. I just want to make sure that people understand that we were still fixing problems in what we have today. And I'm amazed every 2 weeks we find a new unintended side effect. So I think we've said enough on this topic. We can go on to the next topic, Sergey. I think you have.
Maybe one last thing. I wanted to stress that, of course, I'll be here to fix bugs and improve the code. You can count on me with that. Also maybe just to close, like, do we want to discuss this again then sometime next year, and to see if like Team's proposal is the north where we want to go, or and of course afterwards, like when we know where we want to go, we can create a plan with confidence and see what is realistic to achieve in different.
Yeah, so I'd say everyone should read Tim's latest proposal. I have to finish reading the second half, and we should queue a time up dedicated to this topic in early January to hash out our feelings on it and see if we can define the North Star for how we want to end 2021. Rodrigo, don't take any of my comments as personal. It's more just, I 100% agree you're here to support and make the project good. And I'm completely aware that a few of us are jaded by having to continue to find edges that were surprising to us. And so I think independent of that, I think we all want to just make the code more reliable. And maybe that does mean we need to reassess how we pull state to a runtime or checkpoint and that type of thing. So, yeah, cool.
Rodrigo, I really want to call out you because you have the most knowledge today here, and also you are working on the sidecar container for long enough. So I do want to call out you to find a hole on the Team's proposal. We basically, what we want to find a hole, it is, I mean, what I want to say is like there's the edge use cases Team's proposal don't support. I don't want to, I really think about it because Derek and I, and the SIG Node community, most can find a hole is say, oh, here is maybe it's not work with today's the Kubernetes, or how complicated for Kubernetes or SIG Node environment. But I hope someone have use cases in mind and can find a hole. This is not support. Then we can say that that's what Manu earlier said. He worried about we are started from this one. Mark, this is North Star, and then later we want to go to graph dependency again. And that's right. So that's more important for us to figure out the cover most of the edge cases, which edge cases don't cover. Also, I want to explicit document if we agree on this one.
Yeah, I can have another pass on Team's proposal. I think I already did that, but I can double check. Thank
Yeah,
you so
thanks.
much, Don, and
Thanks
thank
for
you, Derek, and everyone, Sergey, everyone. Really, success.
Okay, Docker shim deprecation then. So there were some noise last week, and I think all the bad misunderstandings were diverted by blog posts and stuff, and we see more people being aware of the situation and start migrating. So now, few things that may complicated right now is we discovering more and more vendors who using Docker from their monitoring or security agents. So they being taking a direct dependency on it, and I'm trying to reach out to vendors right now and understand how and when they will support containerd or any other runtime. So maybe Dean is proposing to have a table with different runtimes, and they will fill out which runtimes they support and how to migrate from one to another. We also discussed with Mark, who is on call here as well, what's the plan with Windows. So with Windows, situation right now is we just supported containerd in 120, and we will start migrating customers once we there is a Google situation, Microsoft situation. So in Google it will be a little bit later because we need to implement the support internally and start using it. In Microsoft it will be a little bit faster. So we hope to get some real production users to start using it and start giving us feedback. So what we discussed is we have all tests green, and we believe that we tested everything, but we are not sure because production is always surprising us. We're also not sure because on Linux, containerd was a runtime behind Docker. For Windows, it's not the case. So for Windows, it will be a totally different runtime. That's why we there is a little bit of worry that with the current plan of removing Docker shim in 122, it may be a little bit too fast, and we can get in a situation when customers on Windows wouldn't be able to upgrade, and they will stuck with the version and may not get important updates or important feature for them. So we may what we discussed with Mark is and I want to discuss with vendors, with telemetry vendors as well, how much time they need, and make sure that they are aware that they will be cut off. So once we remove Docker shim and they want to upgrade customers on a newer version of Kubernetes, then they'll be cut off. They wouldn't be able to work. And with this, that said, I think we can we want to propose to review this plan again, plan of deprecation, maybe early January or late January. So we'll have some production customers and we'll have more information, so we can push removal of Docker shim a little bit longer for maybe another release or two. I totally get that it may not be easy decision to push it further, but that may be just reality of life. And I wanted to discuss and collect other opinions. What do you feel about pushing removal a little bit for a little bit longer?
One more thing that I'd like to add is, at least for Windows, when I looked back when the initial pull request and discussions around deprecating Docker shim were arisen, the CRI Docker-D shim didn't fully work with Windows. And the reason for that was there was a handful of places in kubelet code outside of Docker shim specific code paths that have conditional logic if the Go OS is Windows and the container runtime is set to not remote. And most of those were around fixing up paths for the Windows paths. But if we do need to, if Docker shim is going to be removed from the tree, we need to make sure that all of those checks made it into either a Windows specific CRI Docker-D Docker shim, and do proper validation on that as well. And Sergey mentioned, I think from SIG Windows' standpoint, we feel like we've done a pretty thorough job of testing all the different scenarios we could think of, many CNI scenarios, many CSI scenarios, lots of different container run scenarios in SIG Windows with Containerd running as the CRI, both in Azure and GKE. But we don't really have the big volume of customers. So we don't really like what Sergey mentioned. I mean, things always come up in production and that you may not be able to anticipate. So
yeah, so I don't think anybody wants to break anybody. So I think that should be our guiding principle. The part that I'm confused on was Sergey, for your comment on like extending. We basically said Docker shim would remain until the end of 2021, if I'm not mistaken. Are you basically advocating that it might need to extend to 2022, or?
No, current plan is to have it in tree but not compiled, and we don't produce any artifacts. I assume we don't test it as well in 1.22, and it will. After that, it will still be in tree, so you can compile it yourself for a year. And this plan is a little bit too aggressive. I mean, it may be too aggressive. We need to evaluate. If everything goes smooth and like Windows works and telemetry vendors switch from Docker to other runtimes, then it's great. I mean, we all done. Like nobody wants Docker shim to keep Docker shim any longer.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't think anybody wants to break anybody, right? So I think if there's a concern that the community would be too aggressive, I'll be the first to say, raise your hand if you're going to be broken, and we will work a plan to adjust it. And I say that with both my own community and my own vendor hat on, right? So like Red Hat offers Windows container support too, and all these types of things are interesting things to navigate through. So I don't think anyone should be feeling like they're being aggressively pushed in a path that is not tolerable, right? We should find something that works for everybody. So.
Wait, Derek, sorry. So I totally agree with you. This is internal. When I meet with Sergey, I also say the similar things. I say that we don't because community don't. But on the other hand, we do want to. We don't want to forever support the two, and we also don't want to Docker share. This is also real, right? So that's why we do need a set timeline. And I believe we can, and I think that when Dean first talked to us at the SIG Node, we also feel that maybe aggressive, but we want to call out. And we want to call out people take action, right? So we do need some timeline.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not saying 10 years. I think in my mind, I thought we had said 123, but like calendar year 2021, I'm not even sure if we're doing 3 or 4 releases next year, right? As a community, like unknowns happen. So I basically, if people are getting uncomfortable and they want to gather more facts and change course of action, like I don't think that's outside the realm of us listening. So.
Or maybe we could limit the Docker share only for Windows use cases, if people want. And any change related to the Linux, I think we need to have the plan and for this, because otherwise it is the cost for it to carry 2 container runtime. And I mean, we already carry 3 right now, right? So what I'm talking about, the 2 container runtime is mean like the for any change to support no matter it is the Containerd, so both Containerd and also the Docker, even like the effectively they are. So that's why it is really expensive. And even for the vendor people, and actually that's expensive. So this is why we also cannot remove our open source SIG Node Docker testing. So like the first question people keep asking me, say, should we add Containerd into the pre-submit, and should we deprecate the Docker pre-submit, and then people have the consent. So then we end up like every single PR take much longer time.
Yeah, I agree, and I like I've mentioned, for Windows 2 we want to move to Containerd. I just feel a whole lot better knowing that there were some kind of major users using this in production before we completely removed all the code. So I think I agree with everything that's been discussed here.
I totally agree with you, Mark. Even like internal discussing, I try to tell the surrogates decouple Windows Containerd topic from what our deprecation plan. Even like for our internal, I want to decouple. So that's why Windows is a little bit different topic, but I do want to have the milestone. Over time, we can remove of dependency on the Docker engine itself. I mean, Docker engine itself as the container runtime, not Docker itself. We need Docker.
I think it's also important to recognize that there's been some people that are willing to support the external Docker shell that works on CRY. And I think that might be a more viable alternative to just, not having any support. It'd probably be better to, when we say CRY implementations, to start working more towards the CRY Docker shell that's external that uses the CRI interface. Okay.
I totally agree with you, Michael. And actually, even before, long time back, the PM from the Docker actually approached to SIG Node and asked they may want to maintain. I think I introduced them to the SIG Node, but that didn't really fly because they didn't come back.
Well, you might not have seen the information. Surprise! Over the weekend, there was an announcement.
Yes, because all of a sudden they announced, I believe that's the business strategy. It's not like the before. They came to the SIG Node and approached me and said they want to maintain. So I did introduce them. So then I saw that their business plan changed until all of a sudden I saw that over weekend. So another thing is we didn't really talk about deprecate Docker. We only talk about remove Docker shell from the in-tree. Right?
The internal version. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what Sergi was talking about insofar as we're not by default going to be building with the internal Docker shell, but it would still be there and we could still test with it if somebody wanted to for a couple of releases. And I guess that's where Derek's discussion has to come in. When is the time to switch that? And I think it probably, now that we've got an external CRY Docker shell that's going to be competing with the internal Docker shell, we can probably make that okay, when is it equivalent? And certainly Mr. Rossetti's Windows efforts are going to be involved there, where he's got to decide what does he want it to be on Windows, Containerd or Docker or CRY Docker shell.
Yeah, right now I'm not sure, or I haven't decided or haven't thought through enough if it's worth our efforts to try and get the CRY Docker shim to run on Windows and make that stable right now, or just kind of continue to invest and hope that Containerd is the way to go.
Even the Docker guys will tell you, I mean, if you're talking about for Kubernetes, you might as well go right to to Containerd, since that's where it's going to go anyway, unless you wanted to use the Docker storage services and Docker networking instead of CNI and the Containerd storage facilities. Okay. Or services. So it's going to be an interesting 2021. All right.
Okay, so the action item is to come back end of January and review the plan and understand how good we are doing here.
Yeah.
Okay, Ileana.
At least we can relax. We are not really breaking anybody, right? So, but on the other hand, we should have the plan how to decouple, how to move forward. Yeah.
And probably for those things, what was identified as workarounds with this path mangling, it should be moved out of kubelet to corresponding either CRI shim or to some other places where it really belongs.
Yeah, that's true.
I have a super quick one if we have time.
Yes, please. We have 3 minutes still.
Great. So I pulled this in. I put this on future agenda, and then I was hoping we might have a few minutes to discuss today. For those that don't know me, hi, I'm Alana. I am chair of SIG instrumentation, and I am getting more involved in SIG Node, which I'm super excited about. One thing that I have seen other SIGs doing, such as instrumentation, API machinery, is running like regular triage meetings where the SIG goes through basically the big backlog of here are all the open issues, here are all the open PRs, let's make sure someone's assigned, let's make sure that we're giving attention to the high priority things, that kind of thing. And as far as I can tell, SIG Node is not currently doing this. And I was chatting with Dims a few weeks back, and he said, you know, it'd be really great if SIG Node had a triage meeting. So I wanted to raise that in the regular meeting for the SIG Node community to see if there was any interest in that. I'd be happy to help out, or maybe like try to schedule, find a time, that kind of thing, see how that goes if people are interested.
Yeah, so welcome, Alana, and please don't be quiet in our future meetings. We would probably welcome any and all help to coordinate. We had discussed running triage meetings in the past, and we had instead tried to focus on two things. One, like keeping a frequent update on like how we were doing with respect to PR health and that type of thing. And so that's what some of the stuff that Sergey had been talking through. And then the other one was trying to improve the state of our testing infrastructure. I think before we settle on if we'd want to have another meeting or triage forum, it'd be good to get an update on how we feel the testing update pieces have been. But I think in general, I continue to be open on the right way of handling this, and having volunteers help shepherd things is extremely helpful. So maybe in our next meeting, we can get an update on how the testing health activities were going, and then see if we want to now find a right form to maybe transition that into more of a continual triage operational meeting. So can we maybe queue that up for next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing to think through is I'm not sure everyone's calendar availability the remainder of the year. I know this is the time of year that everybody starts heading out. I wanted to suggest that we cancel at least the 22nd and 29th, and needed to make sure that someone was actually going to be around next week, or if folks were going to start taking off earlier. But if there's no objection, at least now, I'd like to maybe agree that we don't hold a meeting the last 2 weeks of December, and then we can follow up between probably Sergey, Renal, and Dawn and myself for next week. Sound good?
Good.
Awesome. All right. Well, bye, everyone, and you have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.